Next on KQED Newsroom, bumpy roads for ride-hailing services. From Uber to Flywheel, the disruptive technologies changing transportation and sparking lawsuits. Covered California, reaching out to ensure nearly 2 million more people in the state. Plus, the founder of the Webby Awards on the impact of technology in our lives.
The key thing is that we've created it, and I think we need to feel like we have more agency in how we use it.
Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Well, even if you don't hail rides using smartphone apps, you've probably read or seen stories about them. Companies like Uber and Lyft have transformed the transportation ecosystem over the past 5 years. Uber by far is the biggest and continues to expand at breakneck speed. It's now in 53 countries and more than 250 cities and boasts 1 million rides each day. But all this growth has also spurred controversy. Privacy, safety, surge pricing, and driver compensation have all become hot-button issues in the on-demand ride service industry. And it's put a dent in traditional taxi use in San Francisco over the past 2 years, according to the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. From March of 2012 to July of 2014, the number of taxi rides per month in the city plummeted by 65%. Well, now taxi companies are jumping on the bandwagon. Many are using the Flywheel app to dispatch cabs. Joining me now for analysis are Sachin, Kansal, Chief Product Officer for Flywheel; Shaheen with UC Berkeley's Transportation Sustainability Center; and Michelle Quinn, San Jose Mercury News business columnist. And Michelle, let's begin with you. Much of the attention has been on Uber because it is the biggest. It's valued at $40 billion. Right. Talk about the issues it's now facing. There's a litany of them.
This company is, you can almost start to feel sorry for it. It's just in the news every week, something happens. But let's just go through the list. It's last week there was a terrorist attack in Sydney. It got criticized for surge pricing at that moment.
Meaning that they were charging more for a ride than they would normally charge.
Afterwards, they corrected it and refunded people, but still, it did not look good. You know, why is a Sydney terrorist attack tied to Uber? Well, it happens. It's just Uber's bad luck this year. Then there was all these issues about privacy, and the company's really beefed up that the company was looking into people's personal data in a way, or making it available, or not protecting it the way they should. So that's the second thing. And then there's complaints about, cities, states, district attorneys are saying, are your drivers safe? Are your vehicles insured? What is going on here? So there's a lot of ways. If you look at it, Uber came out of, it's only been around for 5 years. And this whole industry has kind of just exploded in that time.
And there have been allegations of sexual assaults by Uber drivers in New Delhi and also in Boston, and then sexual assaults in various other cities too. But I wanted to bring in Sachin Kansal with Flywheel at this point, because you have an app that connects taxis with passengers. There's a different model from Uber. Uber is private drivers using their private vehicles. How is your system different in terms of safety and background checks for drivers?
There are 250,000 cabs in the United States. There are about 2,000 cabs in San Francisco. There are about 5,000 drivers in San Francisco. Every single driver goes through a fingerprint-based background check, goes through the FBI list, and makes sure that they don't have any record. We, as a company, have decided to work only with regulated cabs and with licensed insured taxi drivers. So safety is basically a part of our system. None of these drivers have any records on their system, and when a passenger is getting into these cars, they are sure that there is oversight and regulation with these drivers. As a company, we have made that choice because there are basically 3 pillars for us. One is safety, one is availability and convenience, and the third one is price. You mentioned surge pricing. That's a big problem. It's okay for pricing to be dynamic. We are not against dynamic pricing. However, to surprise someone with a 4x or an 8x when it's raining or it happens to be very crowded, we think it's price gouging.
Well, Uber will say that they do request that you, the passenger, agree to that surge price, and so it's not a complete surprise. And why does that happen? Is it like an algorithm that automatically kicks in, or are they picking certain spots, certain times of the day, and being very opportunistic, Susan?
So my understanding is that it's algorithm based and it's a supply and demand based system, so basic economics. So when the surge pricing goes up, that calls more drivers in, and the idea is to bring the supply and demand back into equilibrium.
And we should point out that we did invite Uber to come on the program as well. They declined our request. But Susan, I wanted to get back to you because at UC Berkeley's Transportation and Sustainability Center, you focus on disruption and innovation. What kind of impact are these on-demand ride services having on the transportation ecosystem?
That's a great question and something we're really eager to answer. And it's a difficult question to answer in part because we do have a large ecosystem of all these different transportation choices, and without data on exactly what these systems are doing, it's difficult to analyze them. So at UC Berkeley, we did conduct a study of the transportation network companies this spring. We went into San Francisco and some hotspot locations, basically entertainment locations, and we looked at things to try to get a sense of, well, what might be happening here on an exploratory basis. And so we were able to uncover some things, like Uber was indeed the market leader, followed by Lyft and by Sidecar. We also saw that about 40% of the trips would have been taken by taxi, about 33% of the trips would have been taken by public transportation. We did find that about 4% of trips were actually being used to connect to and from public transport. 20% of the trips actually took people from drinking and driving, so that's a good societal benefit. And we did see about a 40% stated reduction in driving overall.
So who are the people using these services? Did you look at that?
Yes, we did. And so what we found was that, probably not surprising to anybody on this panel, it's the millennials who, 25 to 34-year-olds were representing, well over 50% of the market share. So well-educated, upwardly mobile were the more dominant users of the system, followed by individuals, 10, 15 years older than them.
Did you look at who the drivers are?
Not in this particular study. So this was focused on the users of the system.
But I did want to ask you about the drivers as well, because they are contract workers. These services are gaining in popularity. Are we creating a new normal here where there are a lot of contract workers who are working unprotected and in a deregulated industry?
Or maybe not deregulated, but soon to be regulated, or may one day be regulated. I mean, this is what's happening with Airbnb in New York and here, where public policy questions are being asked. Is this the right thing we want to do? What are the unintended consequences of this? I mean, the thing from an entrepreneur or somebody who's semi-entrepreneurial's perspective, I've got extra room, why don't I rent it? I've got a car that I don't use and I've got time on my hands. And so in a way, what I feel like Uber and Sidecar and Lyft did do,
and to some extent Airbnb.
And Airbnb was they said, let's combine these two things: capacity, extra, resources, and demand. You can't say that people's, given how well Airbnb and Uber and all these people have been doing, you can't say that demand and supply were being served. They were not.
And what are the risks, though? Clearly, there's a need, but what are the risks? This is new territory for a lot of cities and states.
Right. Well, just you mentioned to me about the car, but I hadn't thought of.
I think, as Michelle said, pooling of resources is great. However, there are certain kinds of jobs that need more regulation and oversight than others do. If you're putting a human being behind the wheel of a motor vehicle, I think that comes with a lot of responsibility. Responsibility for the person who's in the back seat and responsibility for the community at large. And what we feel very strongly about is that those checks should be in place, which is why we have taken the approach that we have taken. And we are hoping that our competitors, the entire industry, will actually move to that, because we do have to care about it.
What do you think of Uber? About their tactics? They're viewed as very aggressive. They drop into cities without checking in with lawmakers. Do you view them as competitors, or do you complement one another?
We absolutely see them as competitors. At the end of the day, our job and their job is to bring people from point A to point B. we cannot condone their tactics. I think their tactics are over-aggressive and have led to some of the issues that we are currently seeing. Having said that, I will say that Uber is one of the best things that has happened to the taxi industry. Let's talk about the taxi industry. We are big fans of the taxi industry. We work with the taxi companies. We work with the SFMTA. The only thing that the taxi companies have had missing is technology. And you need technology to provide user convenience. At the end of the day, it's about the end user. The end user needs a car. They need to get from point A to point B. They need that car fast, and they want payment to be seamless. And Uber showed a lot of these taxi companies that you need to do that, otherwise you're going to lose customers. Well, we were in the right place at the right time. We were already working with taxi companies. There was demand to provide mobile hails for users, and that's what we are doing. You stated a stat from the SFMTA where there was a drop, and I just want to make sure that people understand that was only a drop in dispatch rides, people picking up the phone and calling 1-800 their favorite cab. That is the drop. However, Flywheel rides or any mobile-based rides have actually been growing. We have grown tenfold in the last 15 months.
And I do want also to point out that Uber is now borrowing a page from your playbook in that they have said this week they will research using biometrics and also probably voice verification to do background checks on drivers. I want to wrap up this conversation, though, by quickly talking about the sharing economy in general. Where are we headed with this? Because it varies depending on what city you're in, what state you're in, what the laws are, how much taxes do you pay. Where do you see this going?
Well, I mean, to Uber's credit, if they knocked on the door and asked very politely, please let us set up a service here, they would run into, and they've said, we'll run into red tape, bureaucratic delays. Just going in and starting has created the conversation and created the tension. Same thing with Airbnb. You go in and you create the platform, but the problem is that if you just create the platform and say, we don't have any responsibility here very much, then it's very hard for any sort of accountability.
And it is an evolution that we will probably hear much more about in 2015 as well. Thank you all. Michelle Quinn with the San Jose Mercury News, Sachin Kansal with Flywheel, and also Susan Shaheen with UC Berkeley.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, how technology is shaping our future with filmmaker Tiffany Shlain. But first, we're now in the middle of open enrollment for the second year of the Federal Affordable Care Act. The state's health insurance marketplace, Covered California, aims to enroll 1.7 million more people by the end of February. That would be 500,000 more than the number enrolled last year. Scott Schaefer sat down with KQED State of Health blog editor Lisa Alaferis to talk about how it's going and what lies ahead.
Lisa Alaferis, welcome.
Good to be here, Scott.
So we are about a month into this open enrollment period. How's it going?
The first month ended Monday. Covered California released their numbers midweek. 144,000 new people have signed up. Covered California is driving to enroll 500,000 people by the end of open enrollment, February 15th.
So that includes the people who are going to re-up plus new ones?
They want the 1.2 million who are currently in to also renew. Those people, many of them presumably are already renewed. They have until Sunday at midnight to do so.
Yeah, and what happens if they miss that deadline?
If they miss that, Covered California says if they let their coverage lapse, they will be welcomed back with open arms, but they'd have to reapply. So it's a little bit easier to just renew.
Yeah, got it. So it seems like just last month that we were reporting on the disaster that was the rollout of Obamacare and the federal website especially. Take us back over the past year. What happened and where did it leave us?
So the rollout of healthcare.gov did dominate headlines, and the rollout here in California was much smoother. Covered California had an initial conservative goal of enrolling 560,000 people. They more than doubled that by the end of open enrollment. There were missteps along the way. Certainly there were glitches on the website. There were long waits on the call center, and the outreach to Latinos was flawed, and Covered California changed course in January after it was really criticized and ended up with pretty strong enrollment from Latinos as well.
And Latinos are a big portion of the uninsured in California.
They were 60% of the uninsured, so there's great desire to reach them.
Yeah, very good. And so that's great, but all is not well on the horizon. There's a big storm cloud in Washington. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to take up another challenge to the Affordable Care Act. What exactly is the legal basis of this case, and what's at stake?
So this case is about subsidies, one of the linchpins of accessing health insurance. So the Affordable Care Act has a line that says that subsidies are only available to people in state-run exchanges. So the challenge is that those people in the 36 states that are under healthcare.gov, which is federally run, should not be receiving subsidies. Now, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of this challenge, that would really destabilize the entire act.
So it would knock out all those subsidies and destabilize the entire insurance market, basically?
That's the presumption. So California, in theory, could still stand, but if you have people in 36 states without access to health, without access to these subsidies.
Yeah, of course, Congress could fix it if they wanted to.
Experts tell me Congress, would step in and solve.
All will be well. It'll rain beer and everyone will be singing Kumbaya. Last time, of course, Chief Justice John Roberts upheld the Affordable Care Act by a 5-4 vote, so there's a lot at stake, perhaps, on him upholding this part of it as well.
There's a lot at stake.
Yeah. So one thing that was in the original law that was quite deliberate was banning undocumented immigrants from accessing any of the exchanges. But there's a move afoot in California to change that. What's the status of that?
So that bill, Health for All, was introduced last year as well. It did not get very far. It did not indicate any source of funding to improve access to the undocumented immigrants. It's been reintroduced in December by a Southern California Senator, Ricardo Lara, and there's strong legislative support. It would expand Medi-Cal to undocumented immigrants, and it would create a mirror exchange so that undocumented immigrants could access subsidies, but this would all be state financed, and we're waiting to see what the proposal is on how to fund that.
And of course, no word yet on what Governor Brown thinks about that. If it gets to his desk, he's been silent.
Governor Brown, and he also, as we know, doesn't like to approve new spending without a clear funding source.
He's clearly very frugal indeed. And so, Lisa, when all is said and done, I realize we're still in the middle of the game a little bit, but what impact has the Affordable Care Act had, would you say, on health care, on the health system here in California?
So between the Medi-Cal expansion and Covered California, more than 3 million people signed up for insurance. Not all of those people would have been previously uninsured, but the majority, in all likelihood, have gained insurance. National survey shows that 60% of people who have access to health insurance now have used that insurance. And of those, 60% say they would not have been able to access that health care, see a doctor, fill a prescription, go to the hospital. They would not have been able to afford it without the insurance. So it's making a difference. And
none of the big critics' fears have come true, is that fair to say, in terms of rising costs or that sort of thing?
The increase in premiums this year in California was the average was about 4%. So for the moment, we're in this period where it's still early days.
All right, Lisa Alaferis, editor of KQED's State of Health blog. Thanks for coming in, and good health to you in 2015.
And to you, Scott.
Thanks.
Bay Area native Tiffany Shlain made a name for herself in the world of high-tech culture. As the founder of the Webby Awards in 1996, she's been on the scene ever since and has added writer, public speaker, filmmaker, wife, and mother to her resume. Her latest project, The Future Starts Here, is an AOL online series that explores the positive and negative impact of technology on our lives and ways to manage it. The second season of the Emmy-nominated series is currently on AOL. I sat down with Shlain earlier. First, a clip from The Future Starts Here.
I love thinking about this kind of stuff. And you know who else loves thinking about this kind of stuff? My husband, Ken, because he's a professor of robotics. Hey.
Hey.
So, Ken, what is this all about? Why are we creating technologies that are getting more and more creepy?
Well, as our technologies become more sophisticated, they're becoming more and more lifelike. And that triggers a primitive reflex in us because we know it's not human, but it's too close.
Which is uncomfortable and kind of creepy.
Exactly. And there's a word for this. They call it the uncanny.
The uncanny.
And it's not just technologies that trigger this reflex. It's all sorts of things that are close to being human, but aren't. Like wax figures, dolls, robots, or zombies.
So it's like our body's response that warns you, pay extra attention. This might not be what it seems. Ah!
Tiffany, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Well, you embraced the internet and technology early on. You started the Webby Awards 18 years ago when you were only in your 20s. How has technology changed our lives?
Oh, it's changed absolutely every facet of our lives. And you know, I'm interested in this space. I wrestle with it. I mean, I love it and I hate it. And I'm constantly in that space of looking at the good, the bad, and the potential of technology, because it's changed everything.
What is the good and what is the bad?
Well, I mean, you know, the bad is that everyone is so incredibly distracted all the time, and they're amping up their brain all the time to the degree that, you know, my family and I, we're on our 5th year of doing what we call technology Shabbats, where we turn off all screens for a day. Oh. And that was my family's reaction to saying, okay, that's the bad part. We need a day where we're just having a family day and no one is trying to get anyone off of a screen.
And how has that worked out? Did your kids protest?
No, it's been probably the best thing I've ever done. When I was growing up in the 70s, everyone was saying that television was going to destroy my brain. But it didn't destroy our brains. I mean, I ultimately believe in humans. And in a lot of my films for the series, I like to go back throughout history, like a long time ago, and remind us that we've had disruptive technologies before. And at first we get really obsessed and we lose our perspective and boundaries and do it too much, and then we pull back. And so I think I want to invite people to have a conversation with themselves and their families and their partners and friends about, you know, what's the good, what's the part I can maybe stop doing, and what's the potential, what is it allowing me to do? But I'm not on a big picture worried that the world is going in a bad direction. I think technology is incredibly, probably the most empowering tool we've ever created. But the key thing is that we've created it, and I think we need to feel like we have more agency in how we use it.
And your online series for AOL, The Future Starts Here, covers that among many other topics. But one of the episodes talks about building guidelines and filters around technology as parents. And we have a clip from that episode I want to show right now.
Great. So Ken and I decided to trust our daughter. And we got her a phone. Only one that texts and calls, but still a phone. And we did a lot of research and put everything down in a contract, all of our anxieties and our hopes, all the good, all the potential, all the bad, all the ways to kind of use it responsibly and mindfully. And we had a conversation with her, and this part was unexpected, was that just the process of writing it and then discussing it with her was, I think, really empowering for all of us.
I like that feathery pen, by the way, very official there.
It's very kind of Willy Wonka.
Well, what advice do you have for parents who are wondering about what types of limits to set around technology for their kids?
I think just being thoughtful and actually taking the best of what speaks to you and actually doing a contract with your child is a really good thing to do. And just like, this is what we expect, this is how we hope you use it, this is how we hope you don't use it. I think looking at it as a living document, that it's a point of discussion, and it's been really helpful to have that initial contract that we get to reference.
Let's talk about schools as well. There's a lot of concern among teachers who say that students' constant use of smartphones, computers, video games, it's really hampering their attention spans and their ability to work through complicated problems because they're so used to getting an instant answer on Google, for example. How should we as a society address this?
Well, one of the episodes in the new season is called A Case for Dreaming, and it explores the neuroscience of daydreaming and how much creativity comes from when you're just not in front of a screen and you're making connections just that are in your own brain. And so I'm a big proponent of daydreaming, but the reality is we're living in the 21st century and everyone's got screens in front of them. And I think teachers, there's so many environments that are great to use films and research. And then there's times when you need to do hands-on interactive that involve no screens. And I think it's a balance. I mean, that's what I feel like in all of these situations is I don't think, you know, eye contact will always be important for humans, for relationships, for making a connection with someone else, and for understanding information. So I ultimately believe that we're in a really kind of turbulent period with so much, and we just need to be kind of mindful on how we use it.
Well, it is a brave new world. We'll see where it all leads, and I know you'll be keeping track of it. Yeah. Tiffany, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And And joining me now for a look at other news is Scott Schaefer. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Twee.
Well, on Monday, Governor Brown's latest nominee for the state Supreme Court will have a confirmation hearing, and she got some good news this week.
She did. Leonda Kruger is her name, and she was found exceptionally well qualified by the state bar. That's a panel that evaluates all the judicial nominees, and so that really smooths the way for her to be confirmed Monday. It's a 3-person panel, including Kamala Harris. It's a panel that's pretty friendly to Governor Brown, so it really would have taken some shock by the state bar panel to really upend her nomination, but she looks good now.
Some controversy, though, a little bit. With she's at the federal level. She's with the Department of Justice in the Obama administration. Hasn't lived in California for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. It was really one of those out of the blue, out of the box nominations by the governor. And she's very well qualified as far as everyone can tell. She's argued 12 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. So she's, real legal eagle. But there were people, including Willie Brown, who wondered aloud, like, there were no African-American judges, no black lawyers in California who were qualified. But, that's classic Jerry Brown, to just do something that no one expected him to do and pick her out of nowhere.
Sure, and at 38, she would be the youngest appointee and the only African-American on the high court. Wanted to also ask you, bringing it back to San Francisco here, where we are, the city this week unveiled its bid for the 2024 Summer Olympics. What stands out about this bid?
Well, a couple things. One, it's very frugal. They're saying $4.5 billion. You compare that to the $44 billion that China spent on the Summer Games 2008. It's really a Bay Area bid. It's not just San Francisco, but the Warriors Arena here. They're looking ahead to that. San Jose, Berkeley, and then a brand new facility, a temporary facility in Brisbane would also be part of that. So frugal and also Bay Area wide, but existing venues, that's really a key part of it.
And in the little time we have left, I wanted to also talk about the Bay Bridge. It would, of course, be a crucial transportation system if the Olympics come here to town. The new Eastern Span has been criticized for faulty engineering and bolts, but this week a federal study contradicted that.
Right. It was actually a state study that looked at, it was the Chronicle and the Bee were really doing some very difficult investigative reports, found rust in places it shouldn't be. But this state report this week said, no, actually, it's pretty safe. The vast majority of the bolts are fine. It just needs to be maintained and, keep a look after it. But it's completely safe. I don't think that's the final word, but that's what they say this week.
Okay, that's this week.
That's this week, exactly. Stay tuned, as they say.
That's right. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
And for all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.
I'm Scott Schaefer. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Twee Vu. Have a good night and a great holiday season.